dangerous to our elections, and we must use our grassroots energy to ensure that Kentucky will always promise fair and free elections, and to ensure that the Commonwealth follows the values of liberty, freedom, and justice for all. It is our activism in support of voting rights that will create a better Commonwealth, a better America, a better United States, indivisible and with justice for all, in which everyone can be heard because everyone has access to the ballot box. The right to vote is the most essential component to democracy, and yet it is often denied to many American adults. Access to voting is an issue for potential voters who face systemic discrimination through strict voter ID laws, registration prevention measures, removing the right to vote from people with felonies in their past, voter roll purges, challenges to eligibility, the lack of polling hours, and the lack of polling places. These discriminatory practices have been recorded throughout the entirety of our nation's history, and it's important to note that they disproportionately affect minority groups from participating in American democracy due to our long history in this nation of a prison industrial complex, racism, and continued systemic oppressions. Now, most of you all here I know pretty well, and you know that I'm not shy, and that I will use this pulpit to speak what I think needs to be called out. White people have a long history of stripping minorities of their voting rights. So let's work on changing that narrative. Let's denounce the actions of our ancestors and put in the work to ensure that everyone has access to the rights that we have always enjoyed. When one American is prevented from voting, we all lose our chance at having a more perfect union. You see, ensuring that everyone can vote ensures that we have equality under the law and equality in our representation. When we all have access to the ballot box, we are better equipped to hold our elected officials accountable and create legislation which supports the needs of all of our communities. Because minority groups are disproportionately affected by unnecessary electoral restrictions, and because minority groups are more likely to vote progressively, restrictions cause the electorate to swing towards right-wing politics. And when our political sphere swings to the right, our public schools lose, our health care loses, our public spaces lose, our economy loses, and we lose the ability to find middle ground legislation. And I promised I would try to be a bit more bipartisan here today, so in the spirit of democracy, I will try to reel myself in a bit for one day only. Folks, I've dedicated much of my short career to trying to mobilize voters. So many people have told me that they can't vote because they don't have access to official forms of identification. They can't get to the polls because they're working 2 jobs and have 4 mouths to feed at home. Not everyone has the ability to re-register just because they've missed a few elections because they knew that there was no one on that ballot who would advocate for them anyway. Not everyone knows that they are eligible to register because they were formerly incarcerated and were never notified that they had their rights restored. Not everyone is able-bodied and can hold a pen and paper to register to vote. Voting should not be a privilege in our nation that only the white, wealthy, able-bodied people should enjoy. It is a constitutional right. It needs to be accessible to every American adult. While our state legislature is not currently deciding on bills that could infringe upon our voting rights, they have in the past, and they will in the future, and they will in the future if it helps them hinder it and not